You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Happy Tuesday. We are back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. I am your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. And we're going to keep it short and sweet today, just partially because we got a press conference tonight, kind of sandwiching this in a busy schedule. But we'd obviously have to discuss more about the things that we saw coming out of week one and expectations for week two. And the main thing that I want to get to today is the quarterback scenario, because I haven't talked about it that much compared to probably most. I've kind of ignored it to some degree, and that's been by design because I wanted to see some things from my own eyes. But if you've been listening or watching this show for some time, you probably had an idea of where I leaned and what I thought was most likely going to happen this season. I told you. I thought it was going to be Cade McNamara. Now, I'm not very sure about that. I would go very hard the other way. And I wrote about that today on Wolverines Wire, that basically he had an opportunity to close the door on JJ McCarthy. Listen, JJ was going to get his start regardless. From what I was kind of told from people that I talked to that had seen fall camp, it did seem like Cade was ahead. It kind of felt like this was Jim Harbaugh's way of saying, I want JJ McCarthy to be able to go out there and find a way to win the job. And he did it very publicly, right? I mean, outside of the fact that it was him saying, like, listen, we don't have a starter, like one starter, we have two starters, and we'll decide on an official starter in week 3. Between that type of narrative that he started a couple weeks ago, the fact that we get to see it very publicly, how these quarterbacks do, the court of public opinion is siding more and more with JJ McCarthy. And that's not going to decide the quarterback job, of course. But at the same time, like I said on Monday, this was a catastrophic start for Cade McNamara. This was a situation where Cade McNamara had the opportunity to go out there and show with all this talk of I improved, which is what I'd heard. He would be able to go out there and show, all right, it's done, right? Like, yeah, he's going to get his start against Hawaii, but this is obviously my job to lose. I'm not going to lose it. He did the exact opposite of that. Did the exact opposite. Worst case scenario for him, because you look at his stat line, what was it, like 136 yards on 9 for 18. That he threw a touchdown. The interception that looked like he threw wasn't really his fault. And Jim Harbaugh's noting things that aren't his fault, right? I know I want to disabuse you, those of you out there who want to say that all of his throws are errant. I want to disabuse you of that narrative, because they're not. It's not right. He's thrown accurate balls through 3 drops in that game. 2 by Cornelius Johnson, 1 by Ronnie Bell. There's people that say, well, it was okay. No, if it hits you in your chest, that's it, and you don't catch it, that's on you. That's just the fact of the matter. That said, if you want to be the starting quarterback in a battle like this, even though Jim Harbaugh says go out there and play your game can't just be a bunch of checkdowns. The one touchdown you threw can't have been 90% of the work done by the wide receiver, right? It can't be. He's capable of a lot more. We saw him being capable of a lot more. He had huge throws against Ohio State last year, Penn State, Michigan State, right? Like Michigan State, he didn't get much blame for that, and he didn't deserve any of it because he went out there and balled out. He did a really great job in that game. Ohio State, he made a couple mistakes, but anyone's going to make mistakes in a game of that magnitude. CJ Stroud made mistakes, right? Maybe it wasn't an interception, but he still made mistakes. Quarterbacks are going to make mistakes regardless. And if you hinge on every single throw, you're going to find reasons to be unsatisfied. If you watch Tom Brady and you hinge on every throw, you're going to find reasons to be unsatisfied. There's no quarterback out there that is perfect. That is just the nature of it all. Cade didn't need to go out there on Saturday against a overmatched Colorado State team and be perfect. But what he needed to do was fulfill kind of what Jim Harbaugh mentioned on Monday. And granted, this isn't Monday morning quarterbacking or anything like that. But he had asked about like how do you prepare your guys against an overmatched Hawaii team? He's like, well, we got to get better and better. Because I went home and I watched Georgia, I watched Alabama, I watched Ohio State. Those are the teams that we want to be and the teams we want to beat. Was what Cade did going to be enough to do that, given what we know about J.J. McCarthy? It seems unlikely. To me, he needed to show more against a team that really Michigan should have been able to have its way with offensively. And when you watch a lot of other college football games this weekend, it was disheartening to know that was what Cade's output was. So, I mean, not all of his fault. There was a lot of things that certainly need some cleaning up on the offensive side of the ball. Offensive line didn't have its best day, like I mentioned. Running back did okay. I would have liked it to have done better, but there wasn't any like real big explosive plays from the running back position. There were all the drops, but there needed to be more from Cade, because that J.J. McCarthy is going to end up doing more against Hawaii. Yes, it's worse competition even than Colorado State, but it's going to be hard to take it back. Let's get into the J.J. McCarthy part. That side of it momentarily. I do want to continue the Cade talk as well, which we'll finish that momentarily here. But this episode is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy, the easiest place to spice up college football season. It's easy to play. You can win cold, hard cash in a single game. Underdog has investment backing from Mark Cuban, Kevin Durant, Adam Schefter, who you know and love, and more, and they've always been focused on building superior products for a fun user experience. Sign up using the promo code LOCKEDON, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's deposit up to $100, and you get $100 free. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com or find the Underdog Fantasy app in the App Store or Google Play Store. That's Underdog Fantasy, promo code LOCKEDON. Get in on the college football pick'em action today. All right, before I move on to discussing strictly JJ in this, I do want to bring up an analogy that I used and I've been using this in a different way, but it still is very applicable. Wow. It took me 3 times to say that word. To this current situation. Because for a while here, I've been talking about 2018. I've been talking about Alabama and Clemson, that if you have 2 quarterbacks, then you have to have 2 quarterbacks thing that Tom Luginbill and Barrett Sallee were saying. Which, by the way, Barrett Sallee, I'm going to have him on the show at some point. He gave Ohio State an A+ after the Notre Dame game, which is weird to me. But anyhow, I think that the whole 2 quarterback thing, it's funny because there's still people saying, well, Michigan doesn't really have a quarterback, even though Alabama and Clemson, everyone was raving, oh, they've got 2 quarterbacks. Michigan does have 2 quarterbacks, but how did that work out for the incumbents in either of those cases? That's where I want to move the conversation to now, because it didn't for either. And both Clemson and Alabama were college football playoff teams the year before. Kelly Bryant got Clemson in 2017 to the college football playoff. They lost in the first round to Alabama. And Jalen Hurts was part of the team that won the national championship, but he got benched in the second half for Tua Tagovailoa. So this is an instructive moment in the sense of if you can lead your team that deep, you can take your team to the playoff, you can take your team to the championship game, you can start in the championship game. That does not mean your job is safe. And when I say that, I want to also, in the same breath, say Cade McNamara, and this is to echo Anthony Broom, deserves your respect because he did a lot of things that Michigan hasn't had. He gave Michigan a lot of things Michigan hasn't had in nearly 2 decades. I mean, 1 decade win over Ohio State, nearly 2 decades, the Big Ten championship. He should forever go down as one of the greatest Michigan Wolverines because he was the quarterback of the team that got out of the abyss. And he was very instrumental in that, whether you believe that or not. His leadership, without his leadership, Michigan would be nowhere close to any of that. Without his play, Michigan would be nowhere close to that. But the unfortunate thing about college football is that teams have to keep elevating. And when you have a guy, when you have your Tua Tagovailoa or your Trevor Lawrence on the roster, if you are Jalen Hurts or you are Kelly Bryant, you need to do everything in your power to hold them off. Just like Jake Fromm ended up doing with Justin Fields. And unfortunately, Cade hasn't done that yet. He'll still have his opportunities. It's not like he's never going to play again for Michigan. He will. But if he wants that job, number one, he better hope that JJ is just okay. Because you know what? As much as we feel like we know what's coming, this is a different scenario for JJ McCarthy. This is his first start at the college level. This is him shouldering the load. This isn't him just coming in for a couple plays and, all right, let's see what I can do and whatever. The pressure is on him now to perform. And for Cade, I mean, Cade could come out there and throw for 200 yards on extremely limited duty against Hawaii just as much as JJ could go and throw for 300. But the whole point that I'm kind of making with Cade is that Saturday was a missed opportunity for him. And unfortunately, it comes at the worst possible time for him. If Cade ends up being the starter, if the coaches still feel like Cade it deserves that position, then more power to him because he did not earn it in the most important moment that he had to show that he earned it. Because he came out after the game and said, I felt like I earned it coming out of fall camp. Yeah, but if you can do everything in camp, great. If you don't do it well in the games, I mean, John O'Corn, by all accounts of everyone I knew that was in camp, played like a completely different player in camp compared to how he played in the games. Games is what matters. And Michigan needs someone that's going to be able to be a lot more consistent than he was, because that's the thing that made him such a good quarterback was consistency. Taking care of the football, usually able to go through his reads and get to the right choice. He didn't really go through his reads that much. He was playing tight. His opportunities aren't done, but it's the road for him to keep his starting job just got a heck of a lot steeper. And I feel bad because I really, really, really like Cade McNamara. I really do. And part of me, I guess, in a way, was hoping that he would win the job, because that would mean that the guy that helped get you up the hill could continue leading you up the mountain. But sometimes that's just not the way it works. All right, I want to get to one more topic. I was telling myself I wasn't going to do this, but I'm going to. We've talked a lot about Ohio State lately. I want to continue that today because we've got these bullet points, right? We've seen, we now know what we've seen. the reaction to Ohio State, I think, is absurd. But it got me thinking. I was talking with some colleagues, and I just want to share kind of some of my thoughts about that momentarily. All right, I'm going to have to, because I did not do this when talking to colleagues. I was more off the cuff. I was more sitting there saying, well, here's what I think, and I could be so wrong. I want to preface this, especially for you weird Ohio State fans that love to watch or listen to my show. I don't know who listens, because we don't get comments on listens. We get it on YouTube with the watches. But I want to note that I think Ohio State is obviously in contention with Michigan. I know that you don't like that as it is, to win the Big Ten and beyond. But I was just thinking about it, right? Number one point that I've said this on the show several times over the course of its 4 years. And I believe it will be 4 years. The show will be 4 years old next week or the week after or something like that. But teams that beat Notre Dame tend to get significantly overrated. And I know you're going to sit there and shake your fists when you hear that, but if anyone who's coming from the Michigan side of the aisle could be the first to tell you that. 2009, 2010, 2011, well, that one kind of worked. 2013. I mean, you can go back much further than that, but beating Notre Dame has tended to get teams overrated. It ends up being a heightened win. Now, this year it might not look that bad because Notre Dame's schedule is atrocious. That's just putting it lightly. Aside from BYU and Clemson and USC, I guess, I feel like they'll have a pretty good shot. Outside of it's not an atrocious schedule overall. I'm just saying that after Ohio State, I'm not sure how good any of those teams are. Clemson on paper is pretty good, but they looked pretty pedestrian for 2/3, 3/4 of the game yesterday. But here's the other thing I wanted to get to. I'm not that convinced that CJ Stroud is a Heisman-worthy material yet. That's not saying that he can't get there. He had an awesome game against Utah, threw for 80% and almost 600 yards. That's insane. He did really well against Michigan as well. Michigan State. I mean, he was coming on. But some of these other teams, and actually, see, I'm looking at the stats. I'm wrong. I'm not gonna lie. I'm wrong. He played really well against Oregon. He played really well against Penn State. Threw the ball all over the place. So I'm wrong. That said, I just still am not convinced that Ohio State is all that. And clearly neither are the people who do the voting, coaches and the media. Because if you're number 2 and you beat number 5, as was the case for Ohio State against Notre Dame, that should do a lot better than number 3, which Georgia was, I believe, beating number 11 or whatever Oregon was. Yet Georgia moved up. Ohio State moved down. And that's not my argument. I'm just saying that just is people recognizing, I think, that maybe the narrative that Ohio State played so good against Notre Dame is maybe being a little bit artificially elevated. Because I think Notre Dame's offense is maybe awful. They have, thinking about it, I'm not sure how many offensive players that they have as of current that would start at Michigan. Michael Mayer, maybe, but I mean, Michigan's got a loaded tight end room. They really honestly believe Eric All and Luke Schoonmaker are 2 of the best tight ends in the country. What wide receivers would you take? What linemen would you take? What running backs would you take? So the defense which busted relatively often against Notre Dame, but held them out of the end zone, except for once, which is applaudable, and certainly tightened down in the second half. Thought the defense did look better, but it's kind of like saying if you're saying, okay, our defense looked better, and then say Michigan didn't play anybody, you have to sit there and think, how good is the Notre Dame offense truly? Because there's been some weird narratives going around about Notre Dame. I don't remember what show I was watching. I don't remember if it was like a breakaway, if it was watching one of the games, and they're like, showing Notre Dame getting ready, and they're like, oh, Marcus Freeman's such a good head coach. How do we know that? We don't. He's coached 2 games and he's lost them both. I like Marcus Freeman, actually. So it's funny that's I don't want to slam him because I think he's going to end up doing really well, but we don't know how good Notre Dame really actually is. And then if you have this otherworldly offense, you should have been able to do a heck of a lot more than you were. So I just have a lot of questions about what Ohio State is. I'm sure that we are going to talk about them for the 18th show in a row when we have Anthony Treishon on Wednesday. Our plan is also to bring on Clayton Sayfie from the Wolverine. We're going to be guest laden on Wednesday, and then the mailbag on Friday, mailbag on Thursday, preview on Friday. So we might have a guest for the preview, and it might be a recurring one, but we are still trying to figure that out. So hang on for that. But that's going to do it for us today. Like I said, short and sweet. Going to get to the press conference, talk to JJ McCarthy. We will talk to you soon and see you soon. Thank you for watching and or listening. I feel like I was all over the place today. These early season football weeks, man, they get you. All right. Thanks for watching and listening. Peace.